Tony D and Little Joan with a screenwriter's take on Blood and Gold, a movie on Netflix. I'm gonna have to edit myself here. It takes place during a big war, the second of the big wars, and it's about a guy who was in the army with the bad guys from Germany, and he turns against them. And there's everybody's looking for this gold. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. Links in the description. Comedy Horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys, books 1 through 12, available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. So yeah, I'm gonna have to edit myself a bit on this one, but just to let you know, I'm going to do my non-spoiler review first, as always, and then I'll get into the spoilers, and we can break it down for the screenwriters. So it's still on Netflix, so check it out. Basically, what happens is this soldier is he tries to desert, and he's done with the war. Basically, it's towards the end of the war. He's done with it. He tries to desert, and they capture him, and then they try to kill him, but he survives, and then is nursed back to health, and then turns against his former comrades. So it's a really good actioner. The first 2 acts are just about perfect. There's a few moments that are weird lines or whatever, but the action and the pacing are great. A lot of the characters get their own sort of deals, and they have their own personalities and whatnot. So the script's pretty solid. I do have a few problems with it, but for the most part, the first 2 acts are rock solid. The third act is where it doesn't quite come up. Like when you do a 3-act movie, boom, it's got to be boom, boom, way up here, boom. It's got to end huge. It doesn't quite end as huge. It kind of like is boom, boom, and then boom. Little anticlimactic, I think, towards the end. It gets very bloody and gritty. It's kind of like the first 2 acts is almost super heroic, and then the third act, it gets a little bogged down in the realism of the war and the injuries, and kind of slows the whole thing down. It also tries to incorporate certain woke elements, and it's actually pretty successful for most of the movie. But towards the end, they kind of get jammed up, and but for the most part, I found it a very entertaining movie. I would give it like a 6 or a 7 out of 10, and it's pretty decent. My only criticism is that third act should have just, really punched you in the face, and instead it got bogged down in a bunch of stuff I didn't think was necessary. But it was so entertaining in the first 2 acts, and it's paced so well, you'll hardly even notice it. So it does have a decent payoff at the end, but not as epic as I really wanted it to be. So that's my non-spoiler review. I would say if you have Netflix, you could do a lot worse. And if you want to see a decent actioner, I'm telling you, the first 2 acts, there's a lot of cool scenes. And the third act, they're not awful, but they don't hit as hard. Okay, so that concludes my non-spoiler review. So now we're going to get into deets. So the first act starts out great. Heinrich is running away from his comrades. I think they caught him deserting, and the implication is Heinrich is deserting to go find his kid, his surviving kid. They don't really push that part of the movie as hard as they should. That's one of the problems I have with the first 2 acts and the movie in general, but they do put it in there. It is part of his motivation as a character. They also have this kind of weird line where he says, "We are a country of murderers." which is a weird line only because, and I kind of understand why it's in there, because they're trying to separate Heinrich from the rest of the Germans, but it seems a little worldly for a guy who's already been trapped in the war this long, if you know what I mean. And it kind of undermines his commitment to his daughter, which really should have been the focus of the movie, more so than like, oh, I don't like you guys because you're evil or whatever. Like, I get that, but you know, I just don't see it as a realistic line. Anyhow, so the first act, they capture him. They decide to hang him instead of shooting him. And the sergeant is this character who gets shot and stabbed all throughout the movie, usually by Heinrich. So this is the first he gets his like part of his ear shot off, and he wants to just shoot him, but the leader of their little group stops him. And then so they hang him and then drive off. Here's the leader here. He's an interesting character too. And this is the sergeant. So after they drive off, Elsa, the farm girl, comes to his rescue, cuts him down, saves him, takes him back to her farmhouse where he recuperates. So the second act is he wakes up, starts to recuperate, but the trailer to me implied that now he was going to go on a tear and kill all these guys. Instead, it's kind of implied like, I'm just going to try to find my daughter, which didn't seem like a very realistic moment for him to be trapped in the middle of the war, and then he's just going to make his way back home, because under the conditions of that wartime Germany, I don't think it would have been a very realistic plan for him to just, I'm just going to walk home and go find my daughter. I think the infrastructure, even towards the end of the war, would have been in place enough that they eventually would have gotten a hold of him. He had no way of knowing that the entire, regime was collapsing to the point where they would probably never find him, and that the war was over. But so he's about to leave, and then the sergeant and the other guys show up to the farm looking for provisions. Now, Elsa, of course, has her brother who's a little slow, as they say, and she's somehow spared him from what happened to other people like him during this time. Again, I'm trying to talk around this stuff. So she's protecting him. She's trying to keep Heinrich from being caught. And of course, the sergeant and the other guys, they're just jerks. They steal all the food, and then the sergeant's going to assault her, right? So then they have a great scene where Heinrich comes to the rescue, and they're just fighting everybody in the farmhouse. That's a great scene. Great action. And then it gives them the excuse why they have all the armaments and why the Sarge really hates Heinrich and Elsa. So then the next part of the second act, Elsa, Paula, and Heinrich go into the woods to hide because they know the other guys are going to come back. But they leave behind the cow, and the kid wants the cow, right? Because he's slow. He doesn't want to leave the cow behind. They won't take her, so he naturally, and you can see it coming a mile away, he sneaks back to the farm and then gets caught by these guys, right? Because they go right back to the farm the next day to get revenge, and they find him milking the cow. They kill the cow, they take him, they capture him, and now Elsa and Heinrich have to save the kid. Then this is where it gets really dark. So they take him to town and they abuse him, and they're going to hang him at the top of the church. And so Heinrich and Elsa are trying to save him, and they sneak into the church and they're trying to save him, and at the same time they're about to hang him, the slow kid, and there's two guards, and one is yelling down at the crowd from the clock tower And the kid gets mad at him and pushes him out the window and kills him. But as he does it, he gets a hold of his machine gun. The other guard is like, oh no. And the slow kid ends up machine gunning it. And then you have this amazing scene, and they've been calling him moron for like half the movie. He starts shooting down at them and says, who's the moron now? And it's really a great scene. But, Elsa and Heinrich are trying to come to his rescue, but before they can get to him, just as they get to him, boom, he gets popped. And that's pretty dark, man, to kill that character. I get why they did it, but it seemed like a real downer when they killed him off. But, of course, it gave him more motivation to continue to fight, which they do. And then Elsa comes out and tries to kill the commander, right? She just comes out and starts shooting at him. He just stands there and doesn't think she could hit him. But he is struck, apparently, by her beauty so much that he won't shoot her and decides, I'm going to take her in and make her my wife because she resembles my long-lost love, Rebecca. So it was kind of an interesting scene, but at the same time, I felt we were in the realm of unrealistic expectations. But I was fine with that because the rest of the action scene is between the sergeant, some of the other guys, and Henrik. And Henrik is killing them, guys left and right. He almost kills the sergeant, but of course he gets away again. But in the process, Henrik gets a huge piece of shrapnel in his leg. And he manages to escape to a woman's house who gives him medical attention so he doesn't die. So far, I'm all on board. We're deep in the second act here. And then Elsa kills the commander in a great scene. Love that scene. Where she gets his cyanide pill, puts it in her mouth, then kisses him, and then pushes the cyanide pill into his mouth. And he, of course, is horribly scarred, so much so you can see part of his mouth exposed, which is why he wears a partial mask, you can see in this shot. And you see the cyanide pill go down his throat. And that's a great scene, too. So that, to me, is where the movie peaks. Elsa escapes, but Heinrich is still trying to save her. So, but the problem is, Heinrich is now too far injured to actually go through with the rescue. Which the sergeant had a similar wound, and the medic sewed him up, and he was running around fine. Heinrich, however, he doesn't get as good a medical attention, one could argue, but I think they injured him too much. And he's practically out of the game. He's practically out of the movie at this point. He's so injured. And now the tables turn, and Elsa and one of the other women in the town have to rescue him. Which felt, again, it's got a bit of a woke feel to it. Not totally, like I could see it happening, but their chances of actually rescuing Heinrich are pretty bad, considering they still had at least half the squadron of soldiers and, to fight. And Heinrich, up until this point, had been doing most of the fighting, and it had been great. To me, I wanted to see, there's a scene in the movie where the commander is taking this pill, and what they had during that war was they gave the German soldiers these pills. I think it was basically meth or cocaine, so they could continue to fight and stay awake. So what I wanted to see was Heinrich eat a bunch of those pills just so he could recuperate long enough to save Elsa and fight guys again. But they didn't go down that path. To me, it would have been funnier and funny. Then you get the fight at the church, and this is basically the third act. You get the explanation, the big exposition of how the gold came into the town. That's a bit convoluted, in my view. They should have cut that down. I don't think you needed all these people and this huge wind-up of how the gold even got to town, because it just wasn't needed. It was a little too much. But I get why they did it. Again, I mean, it's part of that era and what was happening, so sure. And You get the character of Sonia, who's just utterly ruthless. Again, kind of felt like a girl boss. Kind of felt like it would have been better off with a male playing that role. But that's just me. The sergeant gets stabbed and shot again and again and again. Even in that church scene, he keeps coming back, which I felt was unrealistic considering Heinrich, right? Heinrich, they even save Heinrich's life in that scene, just so he could tell them where the gold is. I like the idea of everybody going for the gold, but the bottom line is, if these characters really believed that the war was coming to an end, their various feuds kind of didn't matter. I mean, there was a lot of gold. 31 bars of gold was a lot of gold. That would make a lot of people rich. Even if you split it 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 ways. I mean, 3 gold bars each, that'd be a lot of money, especially back in those days. And, the problem with carrying it all is an issue too, so you might have to split it up anyway. But these guys, they're greedy. They're greedy beyond belief. And, they didn't play upon the greed like I would have liked to have seen it, and that was my problem kind of with the third act. Like, once the commander died and they realized the Americans are coming, the war's basically done, I would have liked to have seen the soldiers at that point say, okay, we have to ditch our uniforms and try to blend in with the locals and get this gold. And then maybe they cut a deal, because that to me would have been the smarter move. But they don't do that. So they had this big fight in the church. It's very gritty. Too many people die, I think. I get it. It's supposed to be that kind of movie. But it wasn't that was the only fight that wasn't fun. Like the other fights were fun. I wanted to see a fun fight at the end, like some crazy, outrageous fight. It wasn't as crazy and as outrageous as I thought it would be, mainly because, like, Heinrich wasn't doing it. With the girls doing it, it felt like, no. I really wanted to see one last big fight with Heinrich taking everybody out. But instead, we got this, like, endless double cross, and then Sonia in the mix, and, and then the ending with the gold, I didn't like at all, because Sonia gets it, and then the Americans blow her up and then take all the gold for themselves. That didn't seem like the right ending for that movie. Nah, didn't seem like the right ending. To me, the only right ending would have been either the gold somehow gets back to its original owners, but I think they were all dead at that point, or, like, I don't know, Sonia makes a mistake, drives off a cliff into a lake, and then the gold sinks with her, and she gets caught on the gold and gets pulled down and drowns because of it. Nobody ever finds the gold. Something like that. But, they didn't go that way. And then you got the ending with Heinrich finally reuniting with his daughter. I think it would have been a much more effective movie if the entire movie he was like, listen, just let me go. I just want to go back to my daughter. And, And then these guys, maybe they have more of a reason to keep him around because he knows where the gold is for some reason. And they need him. And he's just not interested in the gold. Like, that to me would have been a better movie, but it kind of doesn't play out that way. That being said, the action sequences are pretty badass. All the way up until, again, about the church scene. The church scene's action was okay. It wasn't bad. It's very bloody, but I preferred the first 2 acts and their action scenes because it was Heinrich desperately and just winning. Just barely winning them. Whereas the last scenes just seem like, okay, we're just going to kill everybody now. Except, of course, the sergeant, who, like, you can't... He's, like, nearly impossible to kill. I would have... And even that scene was just, like... Heinrich finally gets his licks in, but it just felt so, like... If the sergeant keeps getting back up, why can't Heinrich? Right? I wanted Heinrich to be some kind of legendary super trooper that just goes on a tear and kills like a million of these guys. You know, because it's kind of an unrealistic movie anyway. You know, there's so many moments where you just go, why are they doing this? You know, how do they think? Like, for instance, the whole idea that they know the gold's in town. Well, it might be in town unless somebody already stole it. Okay, you're convinced it's in the town. Why? Now you're gonna, at one point, the commander's gonna line up everybody and shoot them one at a time until he finds the gold. How do you know that's gonna even work? Most of the town people probably wouldn't know what where the gold was if it was even still there. And the gold, keep in mind, had only been seen like in 38. And this is like 40, 44 or 42. I mean, it's late in the war. The war's just about over. So, yeah, it didn't seem like a really coherent plan unless you had added another element. Like one of the guys had taken a block of gold and tried to sell part of it, and they found it, and that's how they trace it back, because they knew the gold was there. They heard about the gold, or they tortured somebody and got the gold. Something like that. It didn't seem like a totally realistic idea for these guys to go that far afield just to try to get this gold. And they seem to get distracted by a bunch of things. The commander gets distracted by Elsa. The sergeant doesn't seem to be all that interested in parts. He just wants to, like, you know, the war's almost over. Maybe we should get out of here. You know, it needed to be, I think, a little tighter in that respect. And again, Heinrich, he was a great lead. I really wanted to see him go nuts at the end and kill a bunch of dudes. I didn't want to see Elsa save him. I wanted to see him save Elsa. But you might say I'm nitpicking. I still think it was a pretty entertaining movie. Again, I give it about a 6 or 7 out of 10. I mean, it's on Netflix. If you already got Netflix, I mean, it ain't going to cost you nothing. You could probably do a lot worse. Because it was really well-paced movie. So kudos to the director on this. And the stunt coordination. Good stuff. I would just say if the script had one more pass, so a really tight pass on a few things, a few lines, tweaked a couple of the events, I think it would have been like at least a 9. Yeah. But pretty good movie, I'll say. Pretty good. And that's it for me. Tony D. Blood and Gold, Screenwriters. If you want to check it out. It's got a bit of a different take for a World War II movie, I'll say. I probably shouldn't have said that. Damn it, I ruined the algorithm. Oh, well. Oh, well. I made it through most of the video. Anyhow, I'll be back tomorrow with a live stream where we'll talk movies. If you want to ask me about this, ask me. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow.